Hi everyone, and welcome here to our English service at Sweetwater Baptist Church. And just a reminder that all church activities continue to be canceled until further notice. But stay tuned to our Facebook page for any updates and things like that. Now, although all the activities inside the temple continue to be canceled, remember that the church never stops. And I think oftentimes as Christians, we get comfortable with the idea of the church staying inside these walls. But let's use this as a reminder that the church is in each and every one of us, right? It doesn't just stay here, but it goes way beyond that. It's still the same God, and it's still the same message, no matter where we are. And today in this sermon, I titled it, The Fight of Our Lives. So I'm going to ask you guys today to join me, to be the church that God called us to be, and join me in this fight for our lives. And if there's one truth about life, is that it's too short to treat it like it was just some lab experiment, right? In which you could start trying out new methods in how to live it. It's just too short for that. We had to get and set our minds on how we're going to do and how we're going to decide to live our lives. However, remember that you can't change your past, but you can set your destiny by deciding for Christ. And today we're going to be looking at somebody in the Bible who decided for Christ. And we're going to be looking at the story of Daniel. Now, this story is usually used to teach little kids, right? But the truth is that Daniel's story can teach us all a big lesson. And we're going to be reading in the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. And it says, In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of God. And the king commanded Aspenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food, or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him to not defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And we all know that Daniel and his friends went on to have a greater physique than all those eating from the king's food, and we all know what happened with the rest of the story. And although there are many applications that can be taken out of this story today, I want to focus on the fact that Daniel shows God to fight his fights, to fight his battles in life. And you see, one thing that is very interesting here is that to the Israelites, there was a significance behind their name. Their name always meant something. So by changing their name, they were essentially attempting to change their identity. You see, the purpose of changing the food that they ate, their names, the education that they were receiving, was not an attempt to total indoctrination. They were essentially shoving their beliefs down their throat. And if you really look at it, it's similar to how the devil tries to deceive us today. You see, he tries to change our identity. He tries to tell us, you're not a child of God. You don't belong to him. You belong to this world. That's why we have so many people with things like identity crisis and all these kind of things that are going on today. Another thing that the devil does is that he feasts us with what the world has to offer us. He puts all these things in front of us and makes us think that that's what we need in our lives. And the last thing is that he educates us in the way of the world, right? From our schools or whatever the place is, he tries to indoctrinate us the same way that the king was trying to indoctrinate Daniel and his friends. Now, many argue that Daniel and his friends pretty much made a big deal over a little thing, right? And their actions might even bring the question, why bring religion into it, right? And it's like, there's no reason. He just had to do what he had to do, eat the food that they tell him or whatever the case was, and that's it. Why did Daniel and his friends have to bring God into this? And the reason is, God's relationship with Daniel touched every single area of his life. It wasn't just some things, one thing here. No, everything in his life was touched by God. And that's something that we should all be taking from Daniel. A true Christian makes sure that God is in every part and in every area of their life. God should not be excluded from any area. It's not something you choose whenever you feel like it or whenever you need to. God should always be there at all times. And another thing to learn from Daniel is how he faithfully put his trust in God and allowed him to fight his battle. You see, because if Daniel didn't completely trust in God, he wouldn't be able to make that decision. Because in our human mind, it's impossible to get that better physique than the other soldiers and the other people that were picked by simply eating, vegetables and things like that, the royal food. But because he trusted God, he was able to make that decision and allow God to fight this battle for him. Now, although it sounds kind of obvious, one thing to have clear is that life isn't a video game. And the reason I say this is because many times we forget that. You see, in real life, you don't have, you could say, unlimited lives. You don't have unlimited opportunities. One mistake can sometimes lead to a big mess that you can't take back. And you see, in life, you don't get to choose your battles. Situations are going to come into your life that you weren't expecting. In your life, you're not going to get to choose your arena or your stadium like you do in a video game. Oftentimes, you're going to find yourself in places that you didn't plan on being, but that's where the battle needs to be fought. In life, you don't get to choose your opponent. There's going to be people that are going to come and go into your life, and you have to be ready to battle, whatever the case might be. But in life, you get to choose who's going to fight for you. And guys, there's no better person to fight our battles than Jesus. He said it himself, He is life. Who better to guide us through it all than the Creator himself, right? Now the question is, how many more times do we have to get hurt? How many more times do we have to get almost caught? How many more nights of going to sleep with guilt and shame, or going to sleep crying, or whatever the case might be? How many more mornings of waking up hiding secrets from everybody? How many more in order for you to finally come to Christ? You see, I make the active and daily decision to follow Christ every day. And I kind of always understand Him, because there's going to be things that are way beyond our understanding. I can always trust Him. Why? Because time after time, He showed us that He comes through for us. With God, it's not about understanding every single detail about Him, but trusting Him in every single detail in our lives. Time after time, He delivers with His promise. And time after time, He turns out the worst situation into the complete opposite. Choose God to fight your battles, guys. And remember that you're not fighting to gain victory. You're fighting from a stance of victory. Whatever you might be facing today, whether it's an addiction, a broken relationship, a broken family, whatever it is, choose God to fight your battles and leave it in His hands. So now I have a quick illustration for you guys. And as you see, I have this small little rope over here, and it's gonna represent something. So I'm gonna need you guys to use your imagination for a second. And in this rope, I don't know if you guys can see clear, but there's a small knot in the middle of the rope, right? And I want you to think that this little dot represents your time in history, right? Compared to the rest of humanity. And as you see, and although this rope obviously is not an exact representation of humanity, you can see that it's fairly nothing compared to the rest of it all. So what that has us thinking is that, what am I going to do during this little time that I'm here, during this little knot compared to the rest of humanity, and how I'm going to be able to make a difference here? And think about for a second all the people that have left your life at one point or the other without you making a difference and a mark in their lives. Because that's the thing. God is going to throw certain people in your life, and they're not going to be there all the time. And maybe God put them there so you can make a difference. So you can tell them about your God. Right? Many people leave our lives without even, having a difference of what it is to know Christ. And I think C.T. Studd said it best in his poem, and he said, "Only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last." We can accomplish a lot of things, but it's what we do for Christ at the end that is going to matter, right? You could have all these sort of accomplishments here on earth, awards, financial, statements, and all these kind of things that you could get, but at the end is what you did for Christ that really matters. Now I want you guys to use your imagination again, and I got another little rope, and this one, the knot is a little bit more in the beginning, as you can see, right? And now this one is, once again, is going to represent our life, but our individual life, right? And this knot is the life that we live here on earth, compared to the rest of eternity, right? Once again, you see that is nothing compared to the rest of eternity. The truth is, we're only here for a couple of years. The average American lives to be around 79 years old or something like that, but as we know, not all of us get that far, and of course there are exceptions. But the truth is nothing compared to the rest of eternity. Yet, the rest of eternity is determined with the choice that we make now, during this little time, during that little knot that you saw on that rope. And this just goes to show us the importance of making the right choice. Because at the end of it all, no matter who you are, no matter your stance, no matter what you've accomplished, it comes down to two options. You either accept Jesus or you don't. And that's what it all comes down to. You could do all the things in this world, but you're still going to have to answer that simple question. Yes to Jesus or no to Jesus. And I think if time could be talking, it would be saying now. Now is the time. Right? Now is the time to forgive that person that you need to forgive. Now is the time to learn that new thing that you've been wanting to learn. Now is the time to send that text that you needed to send. Now is the time to restore that broken family, that broken relationship. Now is the time to end that addiction in your life. To stop living in guilt and shame. To stop living a double life, right? To stop living for other people's acceptance, because now is the time to start looking for God's acceptance. And that's what we all should be looking for. If you live for acceptance, you will die by rejection. Only worry about gaining God's acceptance in your life. That's what matters at the end. Guys, you see the stats. You see that everything is going on around us. And it just goes to show us that tomorrow is not a guarantee. This whole pandemic has caused a lot of plans that we had in mind to be canceled. And it has shown us that sometimes, no matter how much effort we put into something, it could go away in the blink of an eye, right? No matter how much hours of not sleeping, planning this and putting a lot of effort into it and things like that, it cannot go away like this. Sometimes we let a lot of things take over our lives by giving it way too much importance than we needed it to give. We need to learn to value the things that really matter. And the sad thing with all of this is that, now that we're called to stay at home and practice social distancing, a lot of us are quicker to worry about finding a good show to watch on Netflix than spending more time with our family or spending more time with God. And although it sounds silly, it's the truth a lot of the times. Now, I don't say this stuff to scare anybody, but just to remind that the clock is ticking and the time is now. And although it is really important to worry about our physical death, it's even more important to worry about a possible spiritual death. And the clock is ticking for both. The only difference is that the physical death is set. We're all going to die, and that's a fact. But where we spend the rest of our lives depends on the choice that we make now. You see, you can risk your life on the idea that there might be no God, going out and experimenting what you think is the best way to live your life. But one day you're going to have to face the truth. And if you still haven't made this choice, I want to ask you to take a moment to make this extremely important decision in your life. Now, we tend to have a little more time than we used to have before. Let's use this time wisely and to do something that's going to have an eternal result. A lot of the things we do here on earth, they're temporary. What we accomplish here is temporary. As I said, it can vanish in the blink of an eye. Seek to do things that are going to leave an eternal result in your life, that are going to have a positive impact. All the people that God has been putting around you right now, learn to value them, learn to take care of them, and learn to make a difference in your life. Sometimes our biggest battlefield, our biggest mission is in our own home, with our own parents, with your own sons, husbands, wives. That is sometimes the biggest mission field. Use this as a reminder that it starts in the home. Work on the family. Work in the issues that you have within the home, so then you could go out there and make a difference later on in the world. Work on your relationship with God. Once again, we have more time now. Use it to work on what is most important, your relationship with God. Because at the end of it all comes down to that. Like I said in the poem, only what you did for Christ is going to last at the end. Life is too short to be trying out new things on how to live it best. God has proven time after time. His record is perfect. What He has done is never failed us. I want to invite you guys once again, if you haven't made this choice, if you haven't made this decision to follow Christ, or maybe you did, but you've been straying off for way too long, and you got to ask the question, how many more times until I finally come to Christ? The time is now, guys. There's no better time to do it than now. There's no better time to come to Christ. There's no better time to dedicate your life for Christ than now. So wherever you might be right now, I don't know where that is, whatever you might be doing, nothing is more important than spending your eternity with Christ. So I want to invite you guys real quick to a moment of prayer. And if you haven't made this decision, I encourage you guys to really do it. Because once again, it's not something you're ever going to regret. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord. We thank you for this day. We thank you for allowing us to be here, God. And I just ask for your blessing on all of us today, Lord. Thank you for, even in the midst of everything that's going on, you remind us that you're still in control, God. And we ask you that you give us the knowledge, that you give us the strength to come to you in all of this, Lord, and to seek you and to learn more about you and to grow with you, Lord. We ask you that you give us more time with our family, that we could grow with them, Lord, and learn more about them and grow together as a family like you want us to do, Lord. Remind us that the church goes beyond these walls, Lord, and that we are still called to proclaim your name wherever we are, Lord. That we're still called to trust in you, to read your word, and to live it out in our lives, God. We ask you that you give the strength to all these nurses, to all these doctors, to all these police officers, to people who work in grocery stores, everybody, Lord, that is out here risking their lives, Lord. He asks you to give them their strength to keep going, the courage, the wisdom, Lord. But above everything, we ask that this whole nation, that this whole world could turn their eyes towards you, that they could use this as a wake-up call, that the time is now to turn to you, God, that we've been living away from you way too long, ignoring what you had to say to us for way too long. Let us realize that you are the answer, God, to everything that this world is suffering. We all say this in Jesus' name, amen.